You bought the phone. Now the case looks cheap, and the desk looks like somebody else's desk. Nothing else in the room was touched. You are about to decide this is all in your head. That you are greedy or ungrateful. It is not in your head. The case really did lose value the second the box opened. Your mind never stored what the case was worth, only what it was worth beside whatever else was there. It has a name. The man it is named after lost most of his house to one object he never paid for, and by the end you will know why nothing stopped him. His name was Denis Diderot. He was a French writer, and for most of his life he was poor. Then a friend gave him a gift, a dressing gown of deep scarlet, beautiful, far finer than anything else he owned. He put it on, and his study fell apart. Not physically. By comparison, his writing desk, which had been perfectly good on Monday, looked shabby under the sleeve of the new gown. So he replaced the desk. Then the straw chair he had sat in for years looked wrong beside the new desk, so that went too. Swapped for leather, then the prints on his wall, then the shelves, then the rug. He wrote an essay about it afterwards, with a title that sounds like a joke and is not. Regrets on parting with my old dressing gown. In it he says that he had been the master of his old robe, and had become the slave of the new one. He had wanted one nice thing. He ended in debt, sitting in a room where almost nothing was left of the life he had actually chosen. 250 years later, that is your phone case. And what Diderot described is not a flaw in his character. It is a measurement system doing exactly what it was built to do. Here is the first half of it. In 1980, two psychologists, Douglas Kenrick and Sarah Gutierrez, ran a study on how people judge a face. They showed men a photograph of an ordinary-looking stranger and asked how attractive she was. Some of those men had just been sitting in front of a television show full of unusually beautiful actors. Those men rated the stranger noticeably lower than the men who had not been watching. The photograph was the same photograph. The woman in it had not changed in any way. What had changed was the scale the men were measuring her against, and not one of them noticed it had moved. That is contrast, and it is worth being precise about what it means. Your mind does not store the value of a thing. It stores the value of a thing relative to whatever is sitting near it. Move what is near it and the value moves too, quietly, without consulting you first. You do not experience this as a calculation. You experience it as the case suddenly looking cheap. Here is the second half, and this is the part that costs money. In 1978, three researchers, Philip Brickman, Dan Coates, and Ronnie Janoff-Bullman, tracked down 22 people who had won large sums in the Illinois state lottery. They compared them against ordinary people living in the same area who had won nothing at all. The winners were not much happier day to day than their neighbors. That finding is famous, and it gets repeated everywhere. The second finding almost never does, and it is the one that matters here. The researchers asked everyone to rate a list of small, ordinary pleasures. Talking with a friend, hearing a funny joke, getting a compliment, eating breakfast. The winners rated those things as less enjoyable than the people who had never won anything. The breakfast had not got worse. The friend was the same friend, telling the same jokes. One large event had lifted the reference point, and everything sitting underneath it went quiet. Put those two findings beside each other, and you have the entire engine. A new object does not sit politely next to your old ones and wait to be admired. It becomes the thing they are all measured against. And measuring is not a decision you make in the morning. It runs on its own, all day, whether you want it to or not. There is one more piece, and it comes from an anthropologist. In 1988, Grant McCracken, who studies what objects mean to the people who own them, gave this pattern its name. He called it the Diderot Effect, and he described the thing it happens to, which he called a Diderot unity. His argument is that your possessions are not a pile of separate items that happen to share a house. They are a set. And the set is saying one thing altogether about who you are and where you belong. Every object in it quietly agrees with the others. Bring in something that does not agree, and the set stops making sense. It says two things at once now, and there are only two ways to make it agree again. Send the new thing back, or bring everything else up to meet it. You already know which one people choose. Diderot chose it. So did you, the last time. So why would a mind be built like that? For almost all of human history, it could not have worked this way, because the raw material did not exist. A nomadic foraging band carried what it could carry, and it moved often. Richard B. Lee an anthropologist who spent years living with the Jew Huanzi in the Kalahari, described a life in which people owned very little and gave away most of what they did own. Objects moved constantly from hand to hand. Nobody could build a set because nobody could keep one. So standing was not read off your things. It was read off you directly by people who had been watching you since the day you were born, who shared meat when the sharing was expensive, who could be relied on in a bad season, who told the truth when the truth cost something. There were perhaps 30 people in a camp, and every one of them held the complete record of your life. And here is the part with no modern equivalent at all. The system had a break. Lee documented a custom he called insulting the meat. A hunter would walk back into camp having killed a large animal, enough to feed everyone for days. And the camp would mock it. Too thin. Bones and no fat. Hardly worth the walk out to fetch it. The hunter would agree with them and apologize for the poor kill. Lee did not understand it at first, and asked why. The answer he was given was direct. A man who is praised for his kills begins to think of himself as better than everyone else. And a man who believes he is better inside a camp of 30 people who all need each other to survive the dry season is a danger to all of them. So the praise was capped on purpose. Standing was real, and it was allowed to rise. And then it was held down by hand before it could harden into rank. The ceiling was not an accident of poverty. It was maintained deliberately by everyone, every single time. That is the world your measurement system was designed for. Status assigned by witnesses who knew your entire life, almost no durable objects to carry it, and a ceiling enforced out loud on a regular schedule. Now look at what you actually live in. Most of the people who form an impression of you today will never watch you do anything. They will not see who you shared with or who called you when it went wrong at 2 in the morning. They will see your objects for roughly 2 seconds and decide. So your mind does the only sensible thing with the material available. It keeps the set coherent. It works to make sure your things agree with each other, because for the first time in human history, your things are the testimony, and you are not in the room to defend them. The mechanism is not broken. It is doing careful work with bad inputs, but the break is gone. In the camp, the limit on how high you could climb was other people, laughing at your kill on purpose, because they loved you and needed you to stay level with them. Now the limit is whatever happens to be for sale. There is no upper bound. There is nobody whose job it is to insult the meat. And most of what reaches you in a day is built to move your reference point up 1 notch and then wait quietly for the rest of the room to start looking wrong. What happens to a leveling system when you remove everything that used to level it? You get this. The case after the phone, the chairs after the table, the whole kitchen after the one good pan, which was a gift and which you did not ask for. That is the mismatch. Not greed and not weakness. An ancient system for reading and capping status, running in a place that took the cap off and left the reading, which changes what the useful question is the next time you are standing in front of something you want. The question is not whether you can afford it. That question only ever prices the object, and the object is the cheap part. The question is what this will make look wrong, because that is the real transaction, and it is invisible at the till. You pay for the object once. You pay for the new reference point every time you look at anything standing near it for as long as you keep it. Diderot did not buy a dressing gown. He bought a standard and then spent years paying it off in furniture, one piece at a time, wondering the whole way why he could not seem to stop. Sometimes the honest answer is that nothing will look wrong. The set absorbs the new thing without complaint, and you enjoy it. And that is the end of it. That happens often, and it is worth noticing when it does. And sometimes the answer is that 4 other things will look wrong by Thursday, and you are about to buy those 4 as well without ever once deciding to. You are allowed to buy it anyway. Seeing the second price is not the same as being forbidden the first. Diderot kept the gown, but a bill you cannot see is a bill you cannot refuse. So the sentence worth having standing there in the shop with the thing in your hands is short enough to actually use. What else am I buying? You did not buy the phone. You bought the standard that everything within reach of it would be measured against, including a case that was completely fine on Monday.